Hello, everyone. Dean on the Street, host of the Dean Blechman Show, still down here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. My featured guest is Mitch Swergold from MitchSwergold.com. Really inspiring conversations we're having. Where we left off, Mitch, I want to ask you again. We left off on the last show talking about epigenetics and cancer. How does epigenetics apply to your experience with cancer?
It's a great question, Dean.
Okay, and you might want to just refresh everybody's memory
Sure.
about epigenetics.
Sure.
Okay.
So what epigenetics is all about is epi is Greek for above, and genetics is your DNA strand. So above the DNA strand, at the receptor where it receives information, is the ability to translate that information that it receives and then to express or create a protein based on what it receives.
Wow.
Now that translation can actually be changed, and it's changed based on your attitude.
Wow.
So you know how there are all these studies that show that people actually have higher cancer survival rates when they have a positive attitude than when they have a negative attitude?
I have heard that before, yes.
Well, I didn't realize this at the time, and I only studied epigenetics literally several years. I hadn't even heard the term. I studied several years after this experience, but it turns out that my positive attitude about it was literally telling my genome to have a positive set of proteins that it would express that would help me to heal, to overcome the cancer.
Okay, but does what you're saying, doesn't that apply not just to cancer?
Yeah, absolutely.
That applies to all sorts of illnesses.
It applies to everything in life,
Right.
and this is why it's helpful for understanding stress regulation, which, by the way, is literally everything in life that you perceive to be in any way, shape, or form negative or not what you want it to be. That's a stressor in some way, shape, or form, and we can talk maybe in.
Well, I was gonna say, Mitch, that my audience out there, you know, they've heard some of this before, that a positive mind creates less illness, whether it be cancer or any other types of diseases. I think what's important here is the Mitch Swergold solution, the Holy Grail. How's that your solution and your ingredients, how's it different than what people have heard elsewhere, what they've read elsewhere, what they've heard on talk shows, the popular media? I mean, I think it's really important to, and we could come back, but I think before we end this episode, to give my audience at least a little bit on how Mitch Swergold, your solution is different than what they've heard before.
That is such a good question, and I really appreciate it, because it is important to understand, and it's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I left law and finance 9 years ago, and when I did, I started studying the mind, and I happened to have this cancer experience, and I happened to experience it from a place of being a victor instead of being a victim. And that transformation in mindset then had me say, wow, that was amazing. Like, what happened? I felt good. I felt strong. I felt powerful, instead of being at the whim of something external to me. And so I wanted to understand, because this was really based on meditation and some spiritual teachings. So I want to understand, well, what was really going on in my mind? Because, I'm a lawyer, banker, hedge fund manager, numbers guy.
Right.
I want to understand the science. So I went off and I started studying neuroscience and interpersonal neurobiology and attachment theory, polyvagal theory, epigenetics, and nutrition, and on, and all these different things. And the result is that most of the people I know, even the people who teach me, who are amazing people, incredible, groundbreaking, cutting-edge people, they're very focused in one or two or maybe three silos. Now, I will never have the depth in molecular biology, for instance, that an epigeneticist will have. But I've studied all these different areas, and because of that, I have had the opportunity to put it all together into one grand sort of, or big picture that helps me helping others to understand the mind, to understand stress, and to understand how we can handle those situations.
Okay. So it's not one thing does all.
Right.
Your solution, your program is more of a fully integrated lifestyle
Absolutely.
of different components.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, listen, we still have a lot more to talk about. Okay, but we're going to come back again.
Sounds good.
Mitch Swergold is my guest here. We're down here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Nice enough to meet me down here while I'm dealing with my mother, who's gone in for hip replacement surgery. She's doing great. After this show, I'm going to be going up to her. She's waiting for me and hopefully taking her home tonight.
Beautiful.
But I want to thank you again, MitchSwergold.com. Inspiring story. We got a lot more to share. We'll be back very soon. Dean on the Street, host of the Dean Blechman Show. We'll see you. Have a good evening. Bye. Hello, everyone. Dean on the Street, host of the Dean Blechman Show. Back here still in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. My featured guest, Mitch Swergold. Mitch, good seeing you again.
Dean, thanks again for having me.
You bet. Very exciting episodes we're having here, and we're going to hit it hard right away. Mitch, do you have an idea of what caused your cancer?
I do, Dean. In fact, we never know for sure what caused any one person's particular cancer, but the science behind it has changed dramatically, and that's based on epigenetics, which I was talking about in the last couple of episodes. And so we used to think that there was such a thing as a cancer gene, and it turns out that there's an age-old debate between nature and nurture that goes back hundreds of years. Nature being your genome,
Wow.
and nurture being your environment and what has happened in your environment. And it turns out that it's both. And so you may have a particular type of gene, but on the other hand, it has to be activated, and that happens based on your environment. So the environment that you grow up in has a huge impact on how your genes are going to express for the rest of your life.
Wow.
But the good news is this can be changed, because in the last 15 years, neuroscientists have discovered neuroplasticity. And what that means is that whereas we used to think that by the age of 7, your brain was set, this is the way you are, you're done. We now know for a fact that, in fact, the brain is constantly changing. Every single moment. Right now, your brain is changing, and so is mine. Every single moment of our lives until the moment that we die.
Wow.
And so we can consciously, as I alluded to before, we can consciously change the development of our brain, because when we talk about the brain changing, we're talking about the physical structure of your brain. If you're looking at your brain, okay, you're not going to see it with the naked eye,
Right.
but if you were to see it with an extraordinarily powerful microscope, you would see that the physical structure of your brain is changing every instant of the day.
Wow.
And you can consciously determine how that's going to change. And when you consider that you can also consciously determine how your genetic coding is expressing, you now have the opportunity to choose your future.
Wow. That's amazing, Mitch. That's really amazing.
So in terms of my cancer, I had a very traumatic experience a year earlier that was the reliving of a childhood traumatic experience. I didn't realize it at the time, of course, but in hindsight, I now know this. And it was so deeply painful that that's the environmental factor acting with that's the nurture with the nature, and creating an epigenetic expression, meaning the proteins that are fired by the DNA strand that result in cancer.
Wow.
And so then the overcoming it is the attitude change, going from victim to victor, where I said, this is so great.
Right. Whereas you took it as a great opportunity for you.
Exactly.
Okay, let's get back to this epigenetics, the implications of epigenetics in everyday life.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very important.
How does it affect everyday lives?
So when we're all stressed. Look, we live in an environment of intense stress, and I think that maybe we'll talk in the next episode about what stress is, how to understand it in a completely different way from the way we've been looking at it all our lives, and then how we can act on that stress using the jujitsu move that I told you about before,
Right.
instead of directly opposing it, which never works. Because if you think about that, when you do that, it's like trying to say to that DNA strand, cease to exist. You're trying to block it. Well, that's not going to happen. So instead, how do you change the way it's translating the information that it's receiving? That's the jujitsu move.
Wow.
At the epigenetic level. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. What's next that we're going to come back with?
I think stress. What do you think?
Stress.
Yeah.
We're going to be back with Mitch Swergold,
And then we'll-
MitchSwergold.com. We're going to talk about...
And then we're going to teach some methods for how to transform your stress into strength.
Wow, I'm looking forward to that.
Me too.
I could use some of that.
We all can.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dean.
Dean on the Street, host of the Dean Blechman Show down here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're going to be back with Mitch shortly. From all of us, take care now. Have a good evening. Bye-bye now.